Hi, welcome back to Football League World TV. It's time for the latest episode of the debate, and here we're looking at Watford and another managerial change at Vicarage Road. I'm your host, Dagless, and joining me this morning are Billy Mulley and Ned Holmes. Billy, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all good, thank you. Very, very interesting debate this morning. A situation that played out yesterday, but I'm sure it's going to continue generating conversation for a few days to come.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Ned, how are you getting on?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. As we were saying, it's been a busy international break in the Championship, even with no games, and obviously Edwards sacking continues that. Bit of a laughable decision in my eyes, but I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit.
We will. So that's Rob Edwards that's been removed by Watford. Slaven Bilic going in there. Vicarage Road, another managerial change for the Hornets. Watford fans, if you're watching across Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, get in touch with us. We're live for the next 25 or so minutes. Let us know what you've made of this latest decision by your club. Let's get going. Billy, we'll come to you first of all. You're a Luton fan. So I'd imagine whenever a decision like this comes around at one of your club's rivals, there's always a wry smile across your face. But what was your initial reaction when the news broke?
Yeah, taking off my Luton head and putting an EFL one on for the moment. I think it was probably the same as most Watford fans, most EFL fans, just one of complete confusion. You look at the managerial appointments they've had in the past. Edwards represented something different. It was a project. You could tell in the words. I'm sure we'll go on to the words that Gino Pozzo used. It represented a change, and it sort of within that, it looked like Edwards was going to be given time. 10 games into the season, making a decision like that. I know performances may not have been to a level that Watford fans would have expected, but I think it's clear to see from everyone within the club, it is a project, it is a work in progress. There's imbalances within the squad, so it was always going to pan out that way. But then looking at sort of the performance in general, looking at the results, it is quite baffling, really, that a decision like this has been made so early into his tenure. If it was, a manager that didn't represent this sort of change of approach, then you can kind of expect that from Watford. But given how much was made of this being a new direction for the Hornets, that's the real aspect of this whole story that's completely baffled me and probably baffled the whole entire Watford fan base.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Watford fans were pretty shocked, judging by the reaction on social media when the news started filtering through. And Ned, what did you make of the decision when you first saw it?
I think just like hugely disappointing. Really, it was one of those weird ones where it was kind of, I don't know, you felt maybe a bit of an idiot for having believed Watford that this was their new sort of the new club culture. I just think it really showed that all that talk about understanding the fans wanted this new stability and a project to move forward and move away from that bad reputation that Watford had built up with sort of being a bit of a bringing in managers and sacking them. It really showed that all that talk was nothing more than gesturing, really. I mean, what's the point of bringing in a young coach like Rob Edwards, making all this deal that you're going to trust him only to sack him after 10 games and 50 days of the season? I mean, yeah, you talked about it a little bit with Cardiff fans previously. You've got a feel for the Watford fans, really. They were sold this idea that they'd be listened to and that times were changing at Vicarage Road, and suddenly just the trigger gets pulled this early in the season. The club were relegated last season. They lost a fair few players. It was a new manager stepping up to a new level. So many reasons why you'd understand that there was going to be a teething period. And I understand that the performances and results weren't hugely impressive. And perhaps, with the likes of Burnley and Norwich City starting the season better than Watford, obviously the other two teams relegated, just hugely disappointing. They've clearly looked to make the most of the international break, and we've talked about it before, that really busy period coming up, and it's not, that would not have been a time to change the manager. But yeah, I just think just hugely disappointing, and it speaks volumes that most people that you're seeing talking about this, it's Edwards that's coming out with all the credit, not Watford.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment. We'll get on to those that have made the decision in a minute. Billy, let's just talk Watford's results so far. If we look at where they are on the league table, sitting 10th, but as we've mentioned, we mentioned it in the Cardiff show we did last week after Steve Morrison's sacking. It's so congested at the moment. One win's going to elevate you multiple positions in the table. Yes, Watford's results haven't been spectacular, but they've been, not terrible either. They've only lost 2 games so far this year. Do you think it's fair to say that the performances are the main reason behind Edward sacking, or do you think potentially, there's just something else going on there, that perhaps there's been a change from the ownership in how they want to take the club forward already, and they don't necessarily or weren't seeing eye to eye with what Edwards wanted to do?
Yeah, well, as you say, looking at the season so far, 1 point from the playoffs, 14 points from 10. That's not a bad start from a team that, we're adapting to a new style of play, adapting to a new manager that hasn't been past League 2 level before. There's a lot of factors that they're adapting to. So in that respect, I personally expected a slow start. I expected this kind of start to the season, even though 14 points from 10 games isn't disastrous by any stretch of the imagination. I think performance-wise, I think that's where a little bit of worry might have crept in from the hierarchy. There's been real inconsistency of performances, some poor ones, but they have looked like world beaters at points as well. Looking at the opening day, the way they broke out with pace, the way they kept the ball and really made Sheffield United look at a poor side. Of course, no one has gone on to do that the rest of this season. So I think it's the inconsistency that has played a factor here. We'll go on to it as well, but I think this sort of external conversations with Bilic and probably other interested parties have played a factor in rushing to this kind of decision. But I don't think all of it can be laid down to this external factors. I think performances and the inconsistency of them will be a big factor in this. Doesn't mean that the trigger should have been pulled in the way it has done, but ultimately, I think Gino Pozzo has obviously seen what's happening at Udinese, and there's a lot of success at the moment, and looked at Watford and made a really, really rash decision.
I mean, Ned, really, the sort of inconsistency in performances perhaps should have been expected at Watford. That they've just come down from the Premier League. There's obviously a natural upheaval when that happens, and a manager's come in there, Rob Edwards, that has got a completely fresh approach to how he wants to work. If you look at, the likes of Roy Hodgson, that was in charge towards the end of Watford Spur in the Premier League, he was there to be pragmatic and solid, but perhaps not as expansive or attacking as Rob Edwards wanted to be. There naturally needed to be a little bit of a grace period for Edwards to get those points across. And naturally, results potentially were going to suffer from that. It wasn't going to click straight away. But it seems like Pozzo has, at the start of the tenure, said that's fine, and then when it's actually happened, he doesn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. It's hard to know. Obviously, only Gino Pozzo will know whether when he said those things or when those things were written as said by him, as obviously is often the case in those sort of press releases, whether he really meant it and he really was backing himself to go through on it, and it's really just been that he hasn't been able to follow through on those things, or whether it was just, as we say, a bit of gesturing and he was just trying to really get the fans on board with that sort of thing. You're completely right in that everyone was expecting this sort of run of some early struggles for Watford, and not only that, it's been a really strange Championship season. People, teams, it's been harder to predict week in, week out than most before. It's not like, obviously, Sheffield United and Norwich have looked good, but it's not like there's been teams that really looked a huge cut above everyone else. It's not like we're already saying these are the 3 teams that are going up, as often we have said in the past. And I actually think Edwards has been let down here a lot more than just pulling the rug out from under him now. I don't think that transfer window, I don't think that they did well enough recruitment-wise to give him the players that he needs to fit his system. I don't think he was given a fair crack at it, not only time, but in that sense, the resources either. And I just think I can completely understand why the fans sort of appeared to be turning on the owners a bit. They were promised something. that hell or high water claim, and that's just turned out to be a lie. That the club's not going to be able to progress into this stable, established Premier League club that they want to be if this is continually, this cycle keeps repeating itself over and over again. I think it's stunting their growth, and I think you've got to think that the more exciting coaches, it's a shock they haven't already, but are going to start looking at Watford as not a viable place to go because you're just not going to give them the time.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ed. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about those comments then, Billy, that Gino Pozzo was meant to have said in the sun when Edwards arrived. He said he'll go through hell and high water. Happy to go through that and stick by Edwards, come what may, basically. And here we are, not even in October, and he's gone. What do you make of those comments, first of all? Is he someone potentially that just will say things for effect, but not actually stick by them? I mean, what kind of message does that get across?
Not a positive one, that is for sure. You look at those comments through hell or high water. Initially saying those words is, that's a big enough statement, but then going back so early on what you said is kind of criminal. You especially look at you look at the results, and we've already spoken about the performances. It hasn't been disastrous. Through hell or high water, to me, suggests that you have to be struggling in and around the bottom. No chance of progression, no signs that things are going to get positive. But that's completely false, because none of those things have come to fruition so far. So to me, I think that those comments, Gino Pozzo's comments, is completely they're lies to the fans. They sort of sold the fans a completely wrong message, sold Rob Edwards a completely wrong message, who, still a young and upcoming manager. Really exciting opportunity for him, and to go back on that so early into his tenure is criminal in my eyes.
Ned, it feels like a fair majority of the fans that were perhaps happy might not be the word, but okay or okay enough to tolerate the way the club was being run in terms of these quick-fire managerial changes in previous seasons. It seemed like they could kind of deal with it. This one seems a bit different, where it seems, at least on social media, a few more have kind of turned on Pos. I've seen a few saying this is the last straw and that kind of thing. How do you see it in terms of how the fans now view the ownership at Watford?
Yeah, it certainly does feel like, as you say. I mean, I kind of will move on to the Bilic appointment and stuff like that. I think if we're looking at purely this season, this change of management now could certainly end up with what finishing higher than they would have under Rob Edwards. But it's almost not about that. It's about this. It's about what the club want to be, really, and they were told, the supporters, that the club were changing what they wanted to be, and that Rob Edwards, investing in this young manager and giving him the time was a reflection of that, and that's, I think, what's been the straw that broke the camel's back. Maybe it's about previous seasons. I think Watford fans have kind of known that that they were going to have the excitement of these seasons where they dominate in the Championship, and that might be balanced out by difficult seasons in the Premier League, and by the fact that they've got this sort of changing managers so quickly. But this season, it did feel like that the club were trying to say to them, look, we appreciate what we've been in the past, but we're trying to be different now. And the fact is that they've just proven same old Watford about 50 days into the season.
Yeah, as you mentioned as well there, Ned, earlier on, you start to wonder. Potentially in the past, managers have felt, okay, we'll go to Watford, and fair enough, we're probably going to get sacked in 6 months, but we'll see what we can do. And it comes with the territory. Yeah. But now the ownership has come out and said what they did with Edwards, they were going to stick by him, etc. You wonder what kind of promises they've made to Bilic. Can Bilic believe them? Can future managers believe them? Or does Bilic go in there and in his head think, I've probably got 6 months here, and if it goes well, maybe another 6 months into the Premier League or whatever?
Yeah, I mean the Bilic situation is interesting, obviously, because he's got to know exactly what the situation is there. I think he's got to know that yeah, as you say, even if he takes them up this season, there's a good chance he gets sacked early in the next in what would be their first season in the Premier League. But that was obviously a situation he found himself in with West Brom.
Mm.
So yeah, you've got to think Bilic knows exactly what the situation is. We'll go on to talk about his suitability a bit later, but yeah, he feels like a very different style of coach to bring in, and so that for that reason, yeah, you feel like he's not going to be being made the same promises as Rob Edwards. I think they probably see this as a more instant impact appointment. I think it will be more of them, but yeah, you've got to think that Bilic knows exactly what's going on, and you'd hope for his sake, as it's got that written into his contract. So if he does get sacked, he gets paid for the full 18 months.
Well, exactly. I mean, some managers might just see it as a short, sharp payday at Watford, and then they move on to the next job. Billy, as for Rob Edwards now, Ned said earlier on in the show, he actually leaves with a fair amount of credit, doesn't he, in some respects? You can't forget the job he did at Forest Green. Obviously, it was such a brilliant achievement there. And overall, really, his time at Watford, it's actually quite hard to judge him on it. He wasn't there long. He was starting to get a few ideas across. It wasn't terrible. They're not top of the league, obviously, but it's kind of, it's pretty much as you were, I'd imagine, from where he left Forest Green. So what can you see coming next for Edwards?
Yeah, I still think there's a lot of scope for Rob Edwards to become this excellent manager that we're all expecting of him. Of course, the Forest Green spell was mightily productive, got them promoted, operating under a budget that's not one of the best in the league by any stretch of the imagination. I think, looking at how the squad has fared up in League One, it's been a struggling start. It shows that the squad wasn't perhaps as good as he made it look. I think he's got this clear philosophy that evidently worked in the Football League before. It's just it's the time factor. I think if he is to get another Championship job or a League One job, he needs to go somewhere where time will be afforded, which in contrast to Watford would probably be the majority of clubs out there, because when you invest in a project, I think we've mentioned this quite a lot now, even with the Cardiff show last week. When you invest in a project, you've got to be patient. And I think the majority of clubs will understand that. The majority of the club's hierarchy will understand that. So I think the future is bright for Rob Edwards. I think that he's proven that he can cope in the Championship, and therefore it wouldn't be a surprise to see his name in the conversation of some Championship jobs. Again, top end League One, if some of the bigger clubs start to struggle. You look at Charlton at the moment, and whilst the message of this also applies to Charlton, that it's a project there, so don't pull the plug just yet. But if things do go wrong there and Edwards is available, you can see that being a potential fit. So yeah, I think that the future is bright. He's 39 years old. The abilities he's shown as a manager. I personally think this Watford experience will have brought a lot of positives as well. Being able to handle the pressure of managing a big club. I'm sure that will bode well for him in his immediate future. Whether he rushes back into a job or whether he takes time to really assess where he is as a manager and putting that on hold for the meanwhile, it remains to be seen. But yeah, I think a lot of clubs that will have vacancies as the season progresses will probably start to view Rob Edwards as a potential candidate.
You have to imagine, Ned, that there's going to be a fair few clubs looking at this decision and thinking, well, we'll give it a few more weeks, see what our current guy does, and maybe we'll consider bringing Rob Edwards in.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think his stock hasn't really dropped too far from where it was when he ended up getting the Watford job. I've seen that he's a favourite for the Cardiff job at the moment with the bookies, and that looks a really good fit for me, in the sense of the squad change that they sort of enacted over the summer under Steve Morrison was to bring in sort of more ball players than they'd have previously. It used to be quite a physical and determined, that sort of harder squad, and they've almost brought in players a little bit softer that put their foot on the ball, possession based style, and that would obviously fit in with Edwards in a sense. So I could certainly see him going there. I've sort of seen suggestions that this experience might mean that he's blown his chance at the championship level for the time being. I think that's a bit harsh, really. I'm not sure you can really take too much from 50 days with a team that's just come down and having been promised. It would have been different, I think. We come back. I'm sure everyone that sort of talks about this will come back to those comments about sticking by him. It would have been different if he'd have gone in with a sort of different MO. They've sort of said, we need you to be hit there or thereabouts at this point, and maybe he would have stuck with a system from before. But he's obviously been told he's going to get this patience. So I think, as you say, there are going to be clubs certainly in League One that will be looking at Rob Edwards being free and think, you know what, that's a fantastic opportunity for us. The Rotherham Lynx, I don't really get. As we said, they kind of need someone to go in there and make quite a quick impact, because though they've started the season really strong, we've seen them struggle to sort of stay in the Championship in the past. I don't think he fits their squad really, and it would be a huge risk for them. Huddersfield perhaps could work, but again, they need something a little bit more instant. So perhaps it is going to be one of those League One clubs, potentially a club with a, one of those more desirable managers at the moment. They might see theirs get picked and then they go for Edwards as a replacement. I could see something like that happening.
Yeah, certainly going to be interesting to see what happens with Edwards in the coming weeks. Let's move on to Slaven Bilic now. Billy, the Croatian's back. He's a popular figure in English football. I think that's fair to say. What kind of impact do you think he's going to have at Watford? Is he a good appointment, do you think, on the face of it?
Yeah, I think once the dust settles, once Watford fans take a step away from taking aim at Gino Pozzo and everything that's happened in this situation, they'll start to be spirited by the fact that a manager like Slaven Bilic has been appointed. Of course, he's won promotion from this division before, playing a bright attacking style of play. It's something that certainly will be looked at by Gino Pozzo, and something that can be implemented at Watford, given the creative talents they've got, defensive resilience as well. They've certainly got the players there. Slightly imbalanced squad, but I think looking at what Bilic has done before, and given that he's likely to get the January transfer window to address certain areas, I think that there's definitely scope for this to be a productive appointment, one that lasts more than 50 days. I think as well, looking at the system he used to get promoted, 4-2-3-1, I think there's a lot of scope for that to work at Watford as well. During the 2019-20 season, when Bilic won promotion with West Brom, he got the very best out of Mateus Pereira. So I think that bodes well after João Pedro signing the new deal. I think he can hit incredible heights under Bilic, and I think he'll give him that freedom to do so. Defensively as well, looking at his West Brom stint, I think you can draw a fair few comparisons. It's an experienced backline. So I think in terms of defensive shape, I think that they should be at a level where they won't be shipping goals in for fun. So yeah, I think all in all, it's a good appointment. Being a romantic of up and coming managers plying their trade in the Football League, I'm disappointed that it's not Rob Edwards, as most Watford fans are. But looking at the options that were out there, I think that Bilic is the one that there's a lot of potential reward with it.
Yeah, what would you make of the appointment, Ned? And one question I was going to throw to you both, and I'll start with you. It's quite a swift arrival. It's very much Rob Edwards is leaving, Slaven Bilic is coming in, which kind of suggests that those talks were going on for a little while, and that it was in the mind of those that run the club that Edwards would be leaving as soon as they can find an agreement with Bilic.
Yeah, I mean, on the Bilic appointment, first off, I think I've made my stance on the whole situation fairly clear. I'm pretty staunchly against what Watford have done, but equally, I think it's worth saying that I think there's a strong argument to be made that on a single season impact basis, Slaven Bilic is a coach better suited to get more out of this current Watford squad. Rob Edwards, obviously, the success he'd had in the past, it's sort of similar, I guess, to that sort of Graham Potter situation. leaving Brighton, where he's always had players that were going to buy into his system because they weren't such big names. And now at Chelsea, it's about sort of trying to get those big names to buy into the system. Rob Edwards, again, he'd come up with players, often these were cast-offs from other clubs, and he, got them to buy into the system. And so bigger names were always going to be a bit of a challenge for him. We've seen Slaven Bilic, whether it's West Ham, West Brom, Besiktas, other clubs in the past. He knows how to deal with these big name players, the likes of Ismail Assar, João Pedro, players like that. He's going to be well suited to them. He's got the experience, and as Billy said, that 4-2-3-1 sort of formation is likely to have success with the players in that Watford squad. So I actually think this could turn out, to be, on a single season impact basis, really effective. I wouldn't be surprised if we see, Watford challenging for promotion this season. I think that's likely to happen under Slaven Bilic. But as you say, the speed of the appointment does suggest that not only have they lost faith in Edwards after 50 days, that they've maybe lost faith after him after 40 days, 35 days, 7 games into the season, that they seem to have worked this to have it in line to bring him in straight away. And I guess in some ways, that's good business to have a contingency plan in place, but it shows a lack of faith in that new approach that they were taking from almost the off, really. And I think that's just really disappointing. And it leads you to really understand further why Watford fans feel so betrayed.
Yeah, it almost makes you think, Billy, doesn't it? How serious were they about Edwards? Did they want Bilic from the off? And all of a sudden, here we are. Slaven Bilic is in. When were they first having conversations over whether he'd like to replace Rob Edwards?
Yeah, well, I think a report from The Athletic came out today that even last season, coming to the end of Hodgson's time, there were conversations that took place with Bilic. They wanted him in there. Bilic didn't really want to go. He didn't want to embark on the run to relegation. He preferred, I think that the words were, he would have preferred to have a go at the Championship. So I think from those suggestions, it seems that conversations have been taking place right throughout that time. And now they've pulled the trigger. Now they've gone back on their word. It seems like the appropriate time to bring Bilic in. I think it also, that the report said that Bilic had rejected 2 Championship clubs also in that time as well. So a man in demand, in my eyes, a top Championship manager who can get an immediate response out of this Watford team. It's just all come as a big blow for Rob Edwards. And, I think from what me and Ned have been talking about here, we both want to see him in a good position again, in a decent managerial role. And given, what he has shown, I'm sure that will be quite soon.
Yeah, we will see. We'll see what happens. But good luck to Rob Edwards and whatever comes next. And good luck to Slaven Bilic as well. All things considered, it's nice to see him back in English football as well. We'll see what he can achieve with Watford. Who knows for how long for? We'll see. We'll probably do the debate show in 3 weeks' time with Slaven Bilic being sacked. But good luck to him in the meantime. That's been the debate for this week. Well, today at least. There's probably more coming later on in the week. But that's it for Football League World TV as well for today. Billy and Ned, thanks for joining me this morning. Great to get your thoughts on all things Watford. Those watching as well, thanks for tuning in. Do remember to subscribe to Football League World TV on YouTube if you can, and like this video as well. That would be greatly appreciated by all of us here. But for myself, Billy and Ned, it's bye for now.